If you were alive in the 90s, this sound is burned into your skull. That screech. The modem handshake. The digital door swinging open onto a brand new world. America Online mailed a free CD to basically every house in the country, over and over, until AOL wasn't just how you got online. For one strange, glorious moment, AOL was the internet. You've got mail. And in January of the year 2000, riding higher than any company had ever ridden, AOL did the single most audacious thing in the history of business. It took its stock, its beautiful sky-high .com stock, and it used it to buy the biggest media empire on the face of the earth. Time Warner, CNN, HBO, Warner Brothers, Time Magazine, the whole cathedral of old media, swallowed whole by a company that sold dial-up subscriptions. They called it the deal of the century, $165 billion. And Wall Street stood up and cheered. This is Flatline. Gloves on. You've got mail, and today, it's a death certificate. Tonight, we open up AOL Time Warner. And I promise you the killer is not the one the headlines named. They'll tell you the internet just moved on. It didn't. This patient signed its own death warrant, in ink, in front of the cameras, in January 2000. First, you have to understand how mismatched these two giants really were, because that's where the whole disaster is hiding. On one side, Time Warner, the most powerful media company that had ever existed, decades of Hollywood films, the most watched news network on earth, premium television, magazines, music. Real assets. Real profits. 100 years of prestige. On the other side, America Online, a company that, stripped of the hype, sent you a disc and rented you a slow connection to the web by the hour. But here's the twist that makes this story insane. In early 2000, at the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble, Wall Street decided that AOL, the disc company, was worth more than Time Warner, the empire. AOL's stock was so inflated that this minnow could open its mouth and swallow the whale. And so it did. The architects were two men who could not have been more different. Steve Case, the boyish, turtleneck-wearing founder of AOL, the golden boy of the internet age. And Jerry Levin, the buttoned-up, old-school chief executive of Time Warner, a man who was supposed to know better. Levin looked at AOL's rocket ship stock, and he saw the future, and he decided he wanted Time Warner to ride it. So he agreed to hand his century-old empire to the internet upstart. And presiding over it all was Ted Turner, the founder of CNN, the largest single shareholder in the combined company, a man worth around $10 billion. Turner was so swept up in the excitement that he voted his shares in favor with, in his words, all the enthusiasm of his wedding night. Remember that line. It's going to matter. So how does the biggest merger in history become the biggest disaster in history? Ask most people and you'll get the easy answer. The internet moved on. Dial-up died, broadband took over, AOL became a punchline, and the whole thing just sort of faded. And look, dial-up absolutely was doomed. But that's not what killed this company. And the proof is in one date. The merger was announced on the 10th of January 2000. The NASDAQ, the index that held all of AOL's dot-com magic, peaked exactly 2 months later, on the 10th of March 2000, and then it fell off a cliff. The bubble that made AOL look like a titan burst almost the moment the ink was dry. AOL didn't slowly lose to a better technology. AOL sold itself and bought an empire at the precise top of the biggest stock bubble in a generation. It signed the deal, and then the value it paid was simply evaporated. Because here is the fatal mechanic, the thing underneath the whole catastrophe. AOL did not buy Time Warner with cash. It bought it with stock, with its own wildly overvalued shares. It paid for the future with monopoly money. And the moment the market realized that money wasn't real, the entire foundation of the deal turned to sand. On paper, The accountants had recorded the enormous premium AOL paid, the difference between Time Warner's real worth and the fantasy price, as something called goodwill, roughly $100 billion of it, sitting on the books like a treasure that didn't exist. And when a treasure doesn't exist, eventually you have to admit it. In 2002, the company was forced to write that goodwill down. The number was staggering. Around $99 billion, gone in a single stroke, the largest corporate loss in American history at that point. For the full year, the company reported a net loss of nearly $99 billion. Not lost customers. Not lost market share. $99 billion of value that had never really been there in the first place, formally declared dead. And it got worse, because the two companies didn't just fail financially, they hated each other. AOL's brash, cocky internet cowboys and Time Warner's genteel, old media aristocrats were oil and water. The promised synergies, the magic where the internet company would supercharge the media company, never materialized. Executives feuded. Divisions competed instead of combining. The whole reason for the marriage, the thing that justified the price, simply never happened. So let's call the time of death. The combined company's value collapsed from around $226 billion to roughly $20. Steve Case, the golden boy who engineered it, was pushed out as chairman in early 2003. Jerry Levin was already gone. And Ted Turner. Remember the wedding night? Turner watched his stake evaporate and lost around $8 billion, roughly 80% of his entire fortune. He would later say it was as painful as a death in the family. In 2003, in a final act of corporate humiliation, the board voted to strip the letters AOL off the company's name and quietly become Time Warner again, as if the marriage had never happened. And in 2009, it made the divorce official. The two companies formally split back apart. The deal of the century, unwound. Now for the finding, the line I'd actually write on the certificate. It does not say the internet moved on. Cross that out. What killed AOL Time Warner was the merger itself, a marriage struck at the exact top of a bubble, paid for with paper that was about to become worthless. AOL didn't get disrupted by some outside force. AOL disrupted itself. It took the most valuable thing it would ever have, a stock price built on pure euphoria, and it spent every cent of it buying a company it could neither afford in real money nor ever learn to run. It bought the future with monopoly money, and the bank called before they'd even left the table. This wasn't a company that got mugged. It was a company that walked into a wedding and shot both the bride and the groom. So here's the scar to keep. Be terrified of the deal done at the top. When a company pays for something with its own soaring stock instead of cash, it is making one enormous bet, that the market will never come to its senses. And the market always comes to its senses. Beware too, the merger sold on synergy, that magic word for a future that hasn't happened yet, used to justify a price that only makes sense today. Two companies that need a fairy tale to fit together will usually just break each other. Jerry Levin, the man who pushed the whole thing, would go on television years later, look into the camera, and apologize, call it, plainly, the worst merger in corporate history, and take the blame himself. We've got a whole ward of them now. Kodak clutched its film. Nokia married its keyboard. Toys R Us got bled dry by its owners. MySpace rented out its own crowd. Sears got handed to a mad scientist. WeWork was a landlord in a prophet's clothing. Vine got left to die by the company that owned it. And AOL Time Warner. AOL Time Warner married at the very peak of the market, in front of the whole world, and the two of them quietly buried each other. You've got mail. See you in the next autopsy.